Thank you everyone for joining us today for this webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Florence Mugi. I'm the Resilient Watersheds Network Manager with the Nature Conservancy under the Resilient Watershed Strategy. I'm currently living in Nairobi, Kenya, and I'm honored to be the host for this webinar, where we'll be sharing more about the Resilient Watersheds Network, as well as the Resilient Watersheds Toolbox and resources. So these resources have been revamped to better represent the work that we do on the ground with our partners and all of you. So before we start, or before I introduce the speakers for today, I would like to lay out some webinar rules to ensure that we have a meaningful engagement, both from our speakers and all of you that are joining us. This webinar is being recorded, and therefore the recording will be made available to those who are not able to join us today. All the presentations will be delivered in English. However, we have a Spanish translation available if that language suits you best. Just to guide you in case you would like to use the Spanish language, we have the bar at the bottom of your screens where you'll see the chat, Q&A, raise hand, and interpretation tab. So you can use the interpretation tab to select Spanish if that suits you best. If in English, I believe it's the automatic language selected. We will engage using these tabs throughout the webinars. Therefore, kindly locate the Q&A, the chat, the raise hand, and the interpretation tabs at the bottom of your screens. We will like to know who is joining us, or we'd like to know who is joining us. Therefore, Elizabeth will be opening up a poll. She will paste the tab at the chat, in the chat, where you can click the link and type the country that you are joining in from. So just only type the country that you're joining in from, and that will be on the chat. So Elizabeth, if you can put that on the chat tab. Great. So if you can fill in using the link on the chat, the country that you're joining us from, we'll be able to see it on the screen now. Awesome. Quite interesting representation from across the globe. United States seems to dominate. So please type in on the using the link on the chat where you are joining us from, just the country. We'd appreciate. This way we can get to know who is in the room with us today. I'll just give it one more minute. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing this. And welcome, everybody. So for all the questions during this session, kindly type them on the Q&A tab. Please note the Q&A tab and not the chat. Type your questions there. And if you'd like to ask your questions live on air, please raise hand. Raising hand is at the bottom of your screen, just next to the Q&A and the chat button. And we'll have a good Q&A at the end of the presentations where all your questions will be answered, and those who raise their hands will be queued in to ask their questions live and on air. So by the end of this webinar, we hope that you will be able to understand the network and its offerings, understand the toolbox and its resources, including trainings, library, and case studies, as well as technical assistance that we provide. The webinar is divided into 5 sections: an introduction into the Resilient Watershed Strategy, the network and its offerings, technical assistance and training, toolbox navigation, And we'll have two amazing case studies at the end from Maine and also from Nairobi. And therefore, I'll go ahead to introduce our first speaker. However, just to let you know, I will be introducing each speaker as they come on the screen. So our first speaker is Daniel Shemi, who leads our Nature Conservancy's Resilient Watershed Strategy, which helps cities and communities protect their water sources. In this role, he partners with governments, corporations, and impact investors to accelerate the inclusion of nature-based solutions in water sector spending. So before joining the Conservancy, Daniel previously was a partner at M-Water, which is a mobile water monitoring company, and previously worked with World Bank on water sanitation projects, both in China and Sub-Saharan Africa. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Florence. Really nice to be with you. And good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's really an exciting moment today. I'm calling you all from New York, which is where I live. But as you'll see in my slides, and I think from the last little poll, people are joining from all around the world. So it's really exciting to get this community together at what we're calling kind of the relaunch of our Toolbox. For those of you, some of you may have already used the Toolbox from time to time. You'll be, I think, very excited and pleased by the update that we've made with Florence's leadership. Florence, I'm going to ask you to go to the next slide because I'm just going to do a little table setting just to remind people kind of maybe if you're new to the Resilient Watersheds community and this kind of movement to make investments in nature the norm, that you might just need a reminder who the Nature Conservancy is. So let me just start there. The Nature Conservancy is a 70-plus-year-old organization. By many measures is the largest environmental organization on the planet. You can see that both in terms of the number of members and staff, but also in the number of countries that the Nature Conservancy operates in, 79 countries around the world. You can see a map up there in the corner of your screen just to give you a sense of the breadth. I think, though, whenever I introduce the Nature Conservancy and our very illustrious mission, one thing just to bear in mind is the number, like 1 in 5 scientists, 1 in 5 staff have a science background. So it's really a hallmark of the organization that when we think about taking on really hard environmental challenges, we often take it from a scientific and science-based approach. That's a real hallmark of how we approach the challenges of today. Next slide, Florence. So one of those challenges that we've been, as an organization, committed to for coming on 25 years is the pervasive degradation and kind of persistent degradation of the ecosystems that we rely on for drinking water. So these are the water towers, the headwaters, the catchments. Depending on your parlance, they are where our water comes from. And so if you were to parachute into any of these watersheds, you would find about half of them are kind of reasonably degraded already. So we're already in a place where restoration is going to be a really important factor. And then about half are still in pretty good intact. So protection strategy would be really relevant to maintain the ecosystem integrity of our water sources. From just one measure, source watersheds lose about 5 million hectares a year in forest cover. Not all watersheds or source watersheds are forested, but that gives you just some sense of the pressure on the ecosystems that we rely on for water security. So next slide there, Florence. The good news is that for coming on 25 years, and inspired in some ways by where I come from, where New York, our reliance on a forested watershed that New Yorkers protect every day through their ratepayer, that for 25 years, we've been testing this model that basically what would it take for those parties most interested in theory in keeping that watershed really protected and intact, what would it take to get them to become active participants, both as champions and also as investors upstream in the conservation of their water sources, which has led us, serendipitously towards really focusing on the water sector. So think of this as your water utilities, industrial water actors, big corporations, irrigation districts, and of course, all of the regulatory bodies that surround them and might be concerned about that. Now, that's an interested party, what we kind of sometimes refer to as downstream users, that is every day trying to solve a water security challenge and spends close to $1 trillion a year. So the water sector in aggregate is about $800 billion spent every year. And as you can see in this bar graph, 800 billion, the annual spending, by and large, is going towards built infrastructure or traditional gray infrastructure. All the aqueducts and the reservoirs and the treatment facilities to get so that when you and your family open up the tap, water's there on a regular basis in a clean and reliable fashion. Now, shifting just 1% of that annual spending, so substituting just 1% of spending on traditional infrastructure for natural capital or green infrastructure would eclipse all philanthropic dollars spent on conservation combined by a very meaningful margin. And so we have been deeply interested in this relationship between not so much raising new funding for conservation of water sources, but rather getting a party that's already spending a lot of funding on infrastructure to spend a small fraction of it on green infrastructure. In some cases, actually quite a meaningful fraction, depending on the local business case to do so. So that's at the heart of what we think about when we think, whether it's in an individual watershed or globally, the opportunity to have. So we have all these watersheds that are facing major challenges, but we also have an ally, sometimes an ally that may not even understand that they are an ally, that can be a real ally for keeping those watersheds durably conserved in the long term. And importantly, when there's restorations to be had, to underwrite the cost of that restoration the way that they already underwrite the cost of conveyance and treatment of water supply. So an exciting opportunity there. Florence, to the next slide. So our vision then, as an organization, or the part of the organization that's been focused on watershed conservation for coming on 25 years, is really a more water secure, biodiverse, climate resilient world where people work with nature to create these resilient watersheds. Now, we think of that humbly, I hopefully, is as really, when you think of anything that is as ambitious as that, as at its heart of it, the way we're going to get there is by empowering local partners. And so I'll go to the next slide, Florence, just to describe a little bit of how we approach this work and where the network and the toolbox fits into TNC's larger efforts to reverse the trajectory of degradation of water sources and of water risk facing people and nature today. So one major part of our work is probably the work that many on the people on this call are most familiar with, which is our place-based work. So these are flagship programs, often called water funds or catchment programs, depending on where you are in the world. And they are essentially good examples of collective action investments in watersheds by that downstream water beneficiary stakeholder group in partnership with upstream communities that live and are the stewards of those watersheds. So these are the places where TNC maybe has played a leadership role in the design, or maybe is playing more of an advisory role now that the programs are implemented. And they're in really important biodiverse areas. They often are the places that I call them almost like the living laboratories. If you want to learn about how to do that, I would just say the first thing to do is get on a plane and go visit Nairobi, go visit Cape Town, go visit Quito, go visit Sao Paulo, go visit the Edwards in Texas, or come visit me in New York, and I'd be very happy to show you around. So these are in some ways where we're making a long-term commitment to a geography, both for the outcomes that it generates in its own right, but also for the demonstration value that product.
Thank you, everyone. I think we lost Daniel there. He was almost finishing up. So I will proceed to the next slide, which is just an overview of the watershed investment programs that we have in operations around the continent. And these are just a few that does not cover what other engagement we have, especially within the Nature for Water facility and others that are partner-led and currently at early stages of development. Therefore, our portfolio is 50 and growing massively every other year and month. So with that, Daniel, having set a stage on why TNC cares about our partners and our strategy and the reason why we have the capacity development pillar, we'll move ahead to just introduce the Resilient Watersheds network, which is the next part of the presentation, which was founded by the Nature Conservancy. The network, I know most of you may know it as the Watersheds network. So we just rebranded that to the Resilient Watersheds network, and we founded it in 2014. This was mainly for internal to TNC practitioners to be able to connect and share their best practices for developing nature-based solutions for water security projects. So Elizabeth, thank you. Okay. Perfect. So since then, the network has grown to become a large community of practice with membership spanning from different NGOs as well as civil society. We have corporations, investors, governments, utilities, regulators, as well as academia. And to summarize this is that the network is open to all external partners now since 2019. And these are partners that are interested in investing in nature-based solutions for water security. To that end, most of our membership is external, as you can see from the bar on the screen. And our members have a wide range of expertise in various disciplines as well as backgrounds. This is from watershed conservation to aquatic sciences, governance, financing, marketing, and many other more. So in the network, our members have access to a range of different resources that we provide. And these are specifically tailored for watershed investment programs, which, by the way, includes Watersheds as well. So the members of the Resilient Watershed Network has access to all these resources, which starts with the Resilient Watersheds Toolbox, which we'll cover a little bit later, online trainings as well as virtual trainings, as well as opportunities to continue their learning by attending quarterly webinars like this one. So all our members have access to coaching as well as peer mentorship opportunities. And this is to be able to accelerate NBS or nature-based solutions investment on the ground. Lastly, our members are also among the first people to receive the Nature for Water facilities call for proposals, and therefore they can be able to apply for technical support both within the Nature for Water facility and outside the facility. Our network members influence a lot on the kind of offerings that we provide, and this is through the network survey, annual network survey, and members are able to request for certain offerings or resources or topics that are most useful to them, and the strategy is able to prioritize these offerings. For example, on the screen, can be able to see this one of the results from earlier in the year from the survey. And it shows that there is indeed a gap when it comes to capacity. And therefore, the strategy prioritizes on developing content, resources, and this toolbox specifically that we are launching today is tailored towards matching this capacity gap and ensuring that we are able to support all the partners and bridge the gap in terms of capacity and provide the necessary knowledge and tools needed to accelerate and develop watershed investment programs. So therefore, we highly recommend that if and when this survey comes out at the end of the year, usually these around November, December timeframe, kindly give us responses as the strategy within the Nature Conservancy uses these results for decision making on where capacity resources should be invested most. So to close this first part of the webinar, I'll close it with a poll. This is to let us know some of the offerings or resources that are most interesting to you, or the ones that you find most useful. And these will also guide a continuous engagement through these particular resources. So on the screen, I'm sure you can be able to see a poll. So kindly select certain resources that you find most useful. They can be two, or they can be more. So just give it a minute. Okay, we have the Resilient Watersheds Toolbox. We have the trainings, quarterly webinars, technical assistance, peer-to-peer connections, yeah, following each other. Okay. And you're in luck because today we'll be sharing more about the top three or the top four, which is the toolbox, the trainings, as well as the technical assistance that we provide within the Nature for Water facility and outside that. Thank you, Elizabeth. If we can go back to the slides. And now, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce and welcome our next speaker, who is Eustace. Eustace Laffol serves as the TNC's program lead within the Nature for Water facility. He began his career as a deal lead in its impact investment unit, that is the NatureVest, where he was responsible for developing and structuring transactions in new product areas. Following this, he served as the conservation finance lead to the Resilient Watershed strategy, with a focus on driving sources of long-term sustainable funding into source water protection programs, including the network of 40 or more water funds within the TNC's portfolio. Prior to this, Eustace spent half a decade in private finance sector, principally conducting private and public equity investing in the hedge fund space. Welcome, Eustace.
Thank you so much, Florence. I'm here to tell you a bit more today about the technical assistance and the trainings offerings that our capacity development pillar has. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. So I'm here to tell you a bit more about the capacity development pillar, and specifically as it relates to how we offer technical assistance via the Nature Water facility, as well as how we conduct certain trainings. So as Daniel was mentioning, there is this big $800+ billion water sector. Not much of it is currently focused on nature. We need a paradigm shift there to get that sector to care and invest in nature. And importantly, that paradigm shift also involves developing a network of local partners that can design and implement those watershed investment programs. It's not just the demand level interest in building these programs, it's the supply of the local partners to build and run and scale these programs. And so over the course of the year 2000, the year 2020, TNC was in some way, shape, or form involved in the setup of close to 50 water funds and watershed investment programs. So sometimes TNC was directly the host. Oftentimes we were assisting a third party to set something up. And this, there were a number of flagship programs that emerged from that, such as, the first water fund was in Quito, Ecuador. Other notable callouts in a similar vein include our Edwards Aquifer program in San Antonio, Texas, the Cape Town and Upper Tananairobi examples. Those are all cases that created a lot of inbound interest at TNC of, hey, I would like help in building a watershed investment program somewhere else in the world. Sometimes that request came from TNC field units, but more often than not, it came from externally outside of TNC. And so the purpose of Nature for Water is really to bridge a market failure that we see in building and developing these watershed investment programs. So it's premised on the idea that there are these local champions around the world that are excited to build such programs. These are the champions that are going to be the hosts and face of the program. They are the ones that engage in stakeholder development. They are in charge of local dynamics, but sometimes those local champions benefit from having the technical expertise and from a support factor from a group that has seen how this works in other landscapes before. So Nature for Water, very specifically, is a partnership between TNC and a management consultancy called Pegasus. And it is a purpose-built group that acts in an advisory relationship to local champions. So we are there to support and help design and provide implementation capacity building for these local champions. And the kinds of things we do all relate to a set of expertise that includes project management, stakeholder facilitation, ecology, water sector management, hydrology, GIS, economics, and finance. That is a very long list of expertise categories. Most programs we see in the world need a combination of those factors. And so sometimes it's useful to have a team that supports the local champion that has seen what works in different contexts. So Nature for Water is organized in 3 core focus areas. Our first core focus area is program design. So that's the kinds of products that help define the program. These are things like a pre-feasibility analysis. Is there any sort of match between nature-based solutions and a water security challenge that might scale here? These are things like business cases, are also called feasibility assessments. What's the specific implementation portfolio of nature-based solutions? What's the specific cost? What's the specific benefits? And then we have design phase activities here that include, what is a sustainable funding pathway that's going to work for the medium long term? What's the governance structure? So all of those are things that are featured in program design. Following that, we also have a set of service functions that are around implementation support. So program design is all about the what are the nature-based solutions, what's the cost, what's the benefit. Implementation support is about the how. How do we set up a quarterly cadence for our steer structure? How do we do an annual operating plan and report against it? It's very practical, nuts and bolts kind of stuff that is particularly relevant for newly launched programs that are finding their feet in their first few years. For both program design and implementation support, we offer them either on a pro bono basis. So for program design, we offer that, as Florence mentioned, via a regular call for proposals process, as well as on the fee-based partnership. So if folks come to us and say, hey, I need your help, and we have resources to help pay for your time, that's what we call a fee-based partnership. On the implementation support, on the pro bono basis, we have a newly launched program called the Ground Outcomes, the GO Fund. And the GO Fund is for existing Nature for Water clients who have a newly launched program who need help or would like some additional assistance on this implementation capacity building side. So that's 90% of what we do. The other 10% of what we do is we have a strong commitment to the donors that are the bedrock for this work to open source all the tools, processes, and standard templates that we rely on. Our broader goal is to inspire the water sector to have a whole bunch of folks that operate in this manner. And we want to kickstart a broader provider network and maximize the iterative learning that can occur from a network doing this kind of work. It's pretty early days there, but we're really excited to contribute to the toolbox and the various offerings that Florence is mentioning today. So this map is a map of the 34 local watershed investment programs that we've supported since Nature for Water's inception in 2022. And you can see here it's north of 50% focused on Africa at the time being, but we're rapidly growing and Latin America. We have increasingly presence in Europe, and we're going to be expanding and offering into Asia shortly too. And then to move to the trainings part of the equation, which is really quite vital. So we were on Nature Water, now we're on trainings. There's two principal offerings that we provide here. The first one is to those local champions. That's the target, who are the face, hosts, drivers of these watershed investment programs. Within that, there's two specific offerings. We have an in-person offering that happens probably on an annual basis, or maybe every 18 months, where we get together these champions in a landscape in person, and they compare notes about who's doing what, where, and how. Also, as part of the toolbox, we have a set of virtual and online modules available to anyone at any time, and please check those out. They're very cool. The second type of training that we offer is for development finance institutions, and it's also a training modality offered to utilities and water authorities. The goal of these trainings is to sensitize staff and sort of clients to the opportunity for nature-based solutions to drive water security outcomes. So this is a very new space. The term nature-based solutions actually was developed like less than a decade ago. And so this is a new line of thinking. It requires a paradigm shift. And this trainings for development finance institutions is all about getting the word out. And so we have that sensitization version of the training that's short. We also have a deep dive version where over the course of 3 days, and we have an agenda, sort of mock agenda on the bottom right of the screen here, of what walking through with, in this case, the development finance institution, and a set of projects that they're actively working on. So you can think of like maybe 4 or 5 pipeline projects that involve loans to their to sovereign entities. And how do you integrate nature-based solutions into those specific projects? So there's the broad sensitization training, what are nature-based solutions? And then we have these deep dives of how do we integrate nature-based solutions into your specific landscape and project context. And then lastly, I just want to double click here on the online training modules. This is something very exciting. There's been a lot of hard work that's gone into this, into the new toolbox. So just to say, please check out these resources. There is going to be a set of existing and upcoming webinars and learning modules that cover topics like, what is a water fund? Tell me about water security. How do you do return on investment? And this is going to be expanded soon. And it's deliberately being rolled out in a variety of formats to make it available to different audience types. So please check it out. And we're very excited about the launch. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Eustace. I know Eustace has touched a bit on the toolbox resources, that the training, and he showcased some of the screenshots from our new toolbox site. So with that, I'll go directly to the toolbox navigation, whereby I will give a brief background about the toolbox, why the name change, what is different, and all that. So the Resilient Watersheds Toolbox, as I had mentioned earlier, it's newly revamped, and it was previously known as the Watersheds Toolbox. And it documents over 20 years of experience by the Nature Conservancy and its partners in developing and implementing watershed investment programs. And these includes water funds. So the toolbox is open to all, and we have made it really simple to browse and use, as well as we have ensured it's rich with resources that you might require while designing, developing, and implementing watershed investment programs. This means that it provides guidance, centralizes our learnings, while ensuring our partners can develop and lead programs as well as water funds. Our main aim is to provide learnings and experiences without creating bottlenecks for partners that are establishing quality projects for water security. And if you're familiar with the old Watersheds Toolbox, you must be asking yourself what is new or why did we revamp the toolbox. So the Resilient Watershed Strategy recently released a new report, which is titled Financing Nature for Water Security. And if you have not seen it, we'll provide it, or it's provided in the toolbox that we'll be sharing the link in a few. And you can also see it named as How to Guide to Develop Watershed Investment Programs. This guide or report introduces a new revised methodology that reflects the real world run-ins from our flagship projects on the ground, meaning a revised methodology on how we implement these nature-based solutions or watershed investment programs. Again, this report has a series of accompanying deep dives that delves into specific subject matter areas that are so critical to developing, all in the development process of the NA program that is nature-based solutions for water security. These are topics like regulatory policy framework, stakeholder engagement, governance, sustainable funding, and many more. And these will be found in the special topic section of the toolbox. So the new toolbox also has interactive and compelling case studies that are being implemented by partners as well as from our star flagship projects across the globe, meaning that we do not only have case studies that are being implemented by the Nature Conservancy, but also other case studies that are being implemented by utilities, by governments across the globe, even without TNC's support and guidance. In addition, Eustace has mentioned the online training modules, which we are developing that are shorter and have crisp information on how to develop or even progress a certain topic in the development process of a certain program that is investing in NBS. So the toolbox also has a new section that of the network, and this section has the network sign up information, what the network is about, and also introduces the newsletter and the webinar section, meaning that all the webinars, all the newsletters that we have produced in the past, you can be able to go in there and browse these materials. And again, like this webinar is recorded, and also this webinar will be uploaded in the same platform for quick reference for those who are not able to attend the webinar. So I will now showcase how the current toolbox is structured. Of how the new toolbox is structured with all the items that I have mentioned. So Elizabeth will be pasting the new toolbox link on the chat. So you'll be able to see it on the chat. So Elizabeth, if you can go to the browser of the new toolbox page. So this is what you'll see once you click on the link. So this is how the Resilient Watersheds toolbox looks like. You can be able to go down and up the site. And in these, you can be able to go directly to the toolbox. You can see the Resilient Watersheds strategy website in case you would like to see what the strategy is about and the flagship projects. And you can also visit the Nature for Water facility directly from this toolbox. So if you go to the top and hover around, you'll see there is 5 main sections: introduction into watershed investment programs, the project cycle, special topics, resources, training, and network. And if you click any of these, it will open up to other tabs that might be of interest. So kindly visit the site and you'll be able to have more interaction with it and discover more information that you haven't been able to share in this webinar because it's not as detailed. But I'll also like to emphasize on the special topics where you can find the deep dives that I have mentioned about on the stakeholder engagement, regulatory policy framework, governance, sustainable funding, and much more. And on the trainings and network, you can be able to see the network page, the online training, and the in-person training. So I will not go deeper into the library and the tools and all the case studies because our next speaker, Carlos Loheris, will be able to cover these in just a few minutes. If you can go back to the slides. So we also have quite a bit of upcoming resources that are lined up for you. These includes community engagement guidance module, case studies as well, which is on community engagement. We also have two main reports that are coming out in the next few months. One is the State of Investment in NBS for Water Security report in partnership with Watersheds, and also the Enabling Regulatory Conditions report. We also have a lined up webinars from the governance and stewardship. We'll be looking at assessing terrestrial biodiversity benefits and more. So kindly keep up your eye on the network information that will be coming out in the future for these and more resources. So and now introducing Carlos Rojeris to share more on how we can browse the tools and library resources in the toolbox. Carlos Rojeris is a civil engineer with a master's degree in water resources and has extensive knowledge in hydrological and hydraulic mathematical modeling, water resources management and planning, and the use of technical scientific tools for hydrological systems analysis. With a distinguished career in research and consultancy, he has worked on projects related to watershed analysis, river hydraulic studies, geographic information systems management, and development of softwares, as well as applications for engineering information analysis and correction. Carlos.
Thank you, Florence. Very excited to be here. I'm going to talk a little about the library and the tools section. This section of the Resilient Watershed Toolbox aims to provide the user with technical tools and documentation to be able to analyze the different phases of a watershed investment program and the concepts necessary for investments in nature-based solutions. So in the library section, we have included more than 100 technical references, technical reference documents for the different phases of the development of a watershed investment program. Users can view and download documents containing key elements for the conceptualization, analysis, and establishment of watershed investment programs and nature-based solutions. The toolbox allows you to use different filters to find the desired information, includes filtering by author, phase, if the document is primarily useful for the pre-feasibility, feasibility, design, or execution phase. It also allows you to filter by geographic region or country, by language, and by topic. Within the topics, you can find documents associated with biodiversity, climate adaptation, funding, financing, governance, impact, indigenous people and local communities, monitoring, science, modeling, and stakeholder engagement. So in this first part, we have provided an easy access library that allows users to search and find documents that facilitate analysis processes related to very diverse topics, from guides for effective engagement with stakeholders to guides for monitoring and evaluation. Similarly, we have also included a section in the toolbox about tools. The tools sections aims to provide practical guidance on technical tools that are useful for the evaluation and analysis of resilient watershed programs, including hydrological analysis, sediments, water quality, connectivity, etc. We have included more than 40 tools, and to facilitate their consultation, the user can filter by audience if they are tools mainly oriented to community groups and local stakeholders, conservation organizations and NGOs, development, finance institutions, environmental scientists and hydrologists, policymakers and government agencies, private sector, and business or researchers and academics. The tool can also be filtered according to the most appropriate analysis phase for data implementation, if they are intended to be part of the pre-feasibility, feasibility, design, or execution phase. The user also has a filter on the main topic of the tool, the same as in the library section, biodiversity, climate adaptation, funding and financing, governance, impact, indigenous people and local communities, monitoring, science and modeling, and stakeholder engagement. We have also made a classification according to the type of resource. If it is a tool that is mainly like a guidance, if it is a methodology, if it is a model, or if it is a tool. And finally, we have included a classification of the estimated cost of the tool, whether it is free, cheap, affordable, or expensive. So for each of the tools, you will find a very short description, the audience with which it is mainly associated, the development phase in which it is used is recommended, and the link to the tool or the main download page. Just as a few examples, we have included the two main natural capital project software, Invest as an ecosystem services analysis tool, RIOS as an MBS investment optimizer and portfolio builder. The Think Nature Handbook of Nature-Based Solutions as a valuable guide to MBS analysis. WIP as a widely used hydrological mathematical model, Waterproof as a rapid ROI analysis tool for nature-based solutions, and SWAT as a very classic mathematical model for hydrological analysis. These are just 6 examples of the information that you will find in the toolbox. We have included more than 40 tools that we consider very useful. And well, yeah, you can explore them by yourself by accessing the toolbox. I think this is what I wanted to share. Back to you, Florence.
Thank you so much, Carlos, for that great presentation on the filters, because they are a critical way of accessing tools and libraries in the new toolbox. So now it's my absolute honor to invite our last 2 speakers who will be sharing 2 exciting case studies from Maine and also from Nairobi. Just for a reminder, please remember to type your questions in the Q&A section. The Q&A sections, maybe Elizabeth can type something on there so that you can be able to locate it. Type all your questions there or raise hand. So if I can see one hand raised, we'll have a chance to have these questions answered at the top of the hour, all in the next few minutes. So the first speaker is Karen. Karen guides the Sebago Clean Waters Collaborative in its effort to protect the Sebago Lake watershed through voluntary forest land conservation and other watershed protection measures. Her multifaceted work includes communications, coordination, fundraising, guiding staff, and fostering business and community partnership. She previously served as a coordinator of Mount Agamanticus to the Sea Conservation Initiative, another Southern Maine Conservation Partnership, and as the director of the Casco Bay Sanctuary Partnership. Karen also holds a master's in environmental management from the Duke University Nicholas School of Environment. So Karen will be followed up by Fred Kihara. Fred Kihara is a volunteer member, board member of the Nairobi Waterford, and also an alternate governor of the World Water Council. He has served over 20 years of experience working in nature and water conservation in Africa and holds vast knowledge building public and private partnerships. Fred has an MSc and master's in engineering from the University of Nairobi and further training in natural resources and management from the Colorado State University and strategic leadership in environmental leaders from Harvard School. He previously worked for UNDP and Kenya government before founding the Apatana Nairobi Waterford Trust, which is the Africa's first waterford. Karen, I'll give it up to you now.
Thank you, Florence. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to be talking about, give you an overview of the Sebago Clean Waters Water Fund, which is based in southern Maine, and so in the northeastern part of the US. And Elizabeth, here we go. Okay, so up here in the northeastern part of the United States. So the focus of our work is protecting Sebago Lake. You can see, if you can see this map here, the lake is down here in the center of the map, and the dark blue border shows the watershed area for that lake. And the bluish gray shows the service area, the receiving communities for that drinking water supply. So Sebago Lake is an important and rare drinking water supply. It provides the largest urban area in our state of Maine, Greater Portland, with drinking water. So that's about 220,000 people. And it's rare in that it is one of about 50 drinking water supplies in the United States out of about 13,000 that is so pure it does not need filtration before it is treated and supplied to customers. So our water utility partner, Portland Water District, has what we call a waiver to filtration, meaning that the government does not require that they filter the water before supplying it to customers. And that has a value of, estimated value of about $250 million to the water utility. So we are in the position, the fortunate position of protecting this water supply rather than restoring it at this point in time, which is a nice position to be in. I should add the other rare feature of the lake is that at current withdrawal rates, it holds about 100 years worth of water, which is probably the envy of many other parts of the world, quite honestly. So the primary reason that the lake is so pure is that our watershed is primarily forested. It's about 84% forested, and it essentially serves as a green water treatment plant. There are, of course, many other co-benefits to those forests, including recreation, wildlife habitat, support for the local economy that harvests both forest products as well as hosts tourism. So we are a collaborative of primarily conservation organizations working with the Portland Water District, our water utility. And we are working to implement nature-based solutions, including primarily voluntary forest land conservation, so permanent protection of those watershed forests, stream flow restoration, as well as landowner education and outreach. So the primary goal that we set when we came together in 2017 was to permanently conserve 25% of those watershed forests. So at the time, that meant that we needed to conserve about 35,000 more acres by 2032. That was a 15-year goal, and that is 14,000 hectares. And in addition, we wanted to increase the pace of conservation. So forest conservation had been occurring for at least 35 years at the time. And in order to fuel the momentum and increase the pace of that conservation, we needed to secure new funding sources. And I mean, new to us funding sources. So Daniel pointed out, in many cases, when you're securing new funding, it might be a shift in investment from gray infrastructure or other priorities into green infrastructure. And the strategies, very general strategies that we're using are through collaboration, pooling resources, and making investments in the capacity of our partners who are working on the ground to advance that forest land conservation. We also have a significant commitment from the Portland Water District of providing up to 25% of the funding needed for eligible watershed conservation projects. So we're working to leverage that investment and the traditional funding sources, primarily public funding sources that we use for conservation, with new funding to increase that pace of conservation. So far, we have had success in fundraising. We've been able to raise over $11 million to support our work in the watershed. A large chunk of that came from a federal funding award. In addition, we've been able to engage 12, actually more than 12 now, business partners downstream. And we've also secured significant new private foundation funding, as well as attracting new private donors to the work. In addition, Portland Water District has pledged up to $9 million for forest conservation, and they're also providing support for the operations of Sebago Clean Waters. And I wanted to point out, so these are some of most of the businesses that are supporting us currently. I circled the Grove Collaborative logo here because that business partner was identified through our work with the Nature for Water facility on a financial strategy, which has been very helpful to our work. Excuse me. So the first nature-based solution and the primary one that I mentioned that we're working on is forest land conservation. In the last 6 years, we've been able to conserve 11,000 new acres of land, so about a third of our goal, and that's equivalent to about 4,700 hectares. And overall, the watershed is now 16% forested, permanently conserved forest. And so about 37,000 acres or 15,000 hectares. So we are making progress. We're on pace to meet the goal that we've set. And we are seeing an increase in that pace of conservation. So we're hoping that we will get there before 2032. And I should add that in the part of the United States that we're working in, land parcels tend to be relatively small and primarily privately owned. So a typical project for us would be between, say, 50 acres and 1,000 acres. So getting to 11,000 acres or 4,700 hectares takes many projects. The second nature-based solution that I mentioned that we're working on is stream flow restoration. So opening up the free flow of streams for to improve water quality, to reduce flooding, and also to provide passage for anadromous fish and other species. So in my slide here on the left, you can see a very crushed and blocked culvert on a stream. And on the right is the newly restored stream with a bridge. This happened last year. So we've opened up the flow of this stream, as well as completing 2 other projects within a mile of this that allowed us to open up 29 miles of streams and the primary river that flows into Sebago Lake. So that's about 46 kilometers. Looking ahead in our work right now, we are involved in a strategic planning process, which is centering equity in our work. That involves conversations around things like, should we be considering the implications of our work on affordable housing and our interest in Indigenous land return as part of our work. We're also doing outreach to forest landowners about different ways to sustainably manage their forest land. And that includes the Family Forest Carbon Program, which is a program of the Nature Conservancy and American Forest Foundation that allows family forest owners who have 30 acres or more of land, so relatively small parcels, to receive payments for the management of their forest for carbon storage over a 20-year time frame. So we see that as a very important complement to the permanent forest conservation work that we're doing. And as I mentioned, we're doing the stream flow restoration work and have projects in mind to continue that over the next few years. And we'll certainly continue trying to engage new businesses and research innovative new funding sources to support our work. And I'm going to turn it over to Fred from Nairobi next. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Elizabeth, I think I can control the slides now, but want to thank everyone. And again, Karen, that's a great presentation right there. We for Nairobi, I'll give you a good example of a classical watershed investment program in Africa that was started out of some urgent need. And this has become the norm in the African continent, where by the time the Nature Conservancy got to Africa only 14 years ago, there were many challenges. And some of these challenges, people have been grappling with them for some time. And Nairobi was one area where some important corporates, for example, were scheming how to move out of the city of Nairobi for their manufacturing. And this is, by the time we were starting in 2012, 2015, doing a business case, the challenges were already like overwhelming, water rationing. And this Nairobi waterfall became the first waterfall in Africa. And I will tell you the journey to where we are today. But over the next 10 or 12 minutes, I'll just quickly explain to you about how we've gone and where we are up to date. So just a little bit of Nairobi's background. And there's a small miniature map at the bottom that shows where Nairobi is in Kenya and where Kenya is in Africa. And Africa is our region and our business unit for, for here, and we're working largely in the sub-Saharan Africa. But largely, just to mention again, there is, from the map, you can see that the watershed that supplies water to the city of Nairobi, located to the bottom of the map, roughly is about 1 million hectares. And a third of it is either Mount Kenya National Park and the forest, or the Aberdare National Park. And there the approach is to work with Kenya government agencies responsible for wildlife and responsible for forest and water resources. But the rest 2/3 is land that's owned by community people. People individually own the land and they are farmers. So you would note that there are about 9 million people that we work with, or we work for. 5 million people reside within this watershed, and 4 million people are further down in the city of Nairobi. Again, by this major river called River Tana that starts from this area and flows for another 1,000 kilometers to the Indian Ocean. It's where we generate 65% of Kenya's hydropower. And that's synonymous to about 40% of all energy that is generated by the country for its economy. So very important there. But largely, I would just like to urge those of you who like to come to Africa for a safari that the time is now. We have some of these really iconic wildlife. We got the big 5, we got the small 5, we got the main cats, the leopards, the cheetahs, the lions, and so on. And you can come see them here. Part of these are very endangered species like the black rhinos. Getting now to see an endemic black rhino in the wild, or the mountain bog antelopes, is something really unique. And part of this is what we have to do with the one that which is under the national parks. And just like my colleagues have spoken there, and particularly you've heard this from Karen and from others there, is that the core business of what we do is to conserve nature, but conserve nature in such a way as to provide clean, ample water for our communities who live further downstream. And I'll just give you a few attributes of Nairobi Waterford, how we're doing this, and then after that, I'll explain a little bit about its maturity. And for those who work for the Nature Conservancy, we really appreciate this as a real one conservancy approach. Nobody in Africa knew what a waterford is 12 years ago. And we depended on South running largely from Latin America and people from elsewhere who came and helped us analyze that's a good thing to do. And then later on helped us through the initiation of both the business case and the implementation phase. We really embrace the idea of sustainable funding models. And the point is, in most places in Africa, the challenges are many. And challenges are from a social dimension in terms of education and health to development. And so being able to really think about how will you sustain nature-based solutions kind of work is something that we've had to run around and get going. We're also looking at how can we really create long-term climate impacts, long-term biodiversity protection impacts, because this is what we need most. How can we make sure that we invest on the resilience of our communities who are suffering from not having enough food? How can they participate in this and produce enough food, produce income, and be able to take their children to college? So that's part of what we do on top of given that we take care of nature. We're building this as a public-private partnership, and we've heard about that today. We want a lasting partnership, and we bring in government And again, very dependent upon private sector who understand their challenges. And then we implement there what we call our 3 goals. How can we conserve nature? How can we provide clean water and also community benefits? So we did appreciate the model that I think Eustace talked about a lot, about being guided by science and having a business case. In Africa, it's difficult. It's not too easy to be allocated public sector money because most of it is tax money or borrowed credit that's supposed to go to development. And we, in 2016, actually got declared by Kenya government as a national priority, together with their major infrastructure projects, that building a green infrastructure for the sources of water, where Nairobi gets 95% of its water, was critical for the country. And with that, the government endorsed us for some public sector funding, and we were then able to provide some match for the private sector funding that we had also gotten to match what government could match what private sector was giving. And again, saying that being able to put quite some timely and transparent tracking and reporting for results is one thing that has helped us be able to respond to all the people who fund us and the people who look at us. How can we sustain our credibility? How do we make sure that our model is unique, but also we need to show leadership? So again, moving on a little bit, just to mention that the great lessons are great, but we also convince major corporates in this part of the world. Kenya government endorsed us to get allocation of money given to Kenya by the Global Environment Facility through IFAD, and that became what we matched the private sector with. I think in terms of financial muscle there, we were able to raise about $4 million from private sector, and government endorsed us for another $4 million from the GF. And then we had 8, and collectively we were able to chase another competitive grant and this an additional $4 million. And then we were able to start things like an endowment. So again, that's how we've been able to grow. But to compare what we've been doing with what Karen just talked, we are, like I said, our population numbers are very high. Up to today, we are working with over 260,000 smallholder farmers that we have had to engage. Our numbers are wide-headed in terms of individuals in those households that we are able to work with. We've been able to plant over 4.8 million trees. In terms of areas we've had to cover because the erosion was a big problem. These farmers needed to do rainwater harvesting to stop pumping the rivers dry during the dry season. We've had to work with on over 210,000 hectares of such kind of lands. And as you can see, again, now we've been able to cut down the sediments flowing into the rivers by 16%. And we are seeing, particularly during the dry season, that we have about 15% more water flowing that then can quench the city of Nairobi further downstream. We've still had to make major decisions. One of the decisions comes out of the business case, requires us to invest at least $1 million every year. We are on the 8th year, and we've kept this every year. So again, being able to be committed, getting partners who are committed, and stakeholders who walk the path with us, being cost effective. We mobilize our communities provide labor needed for their work, and that cuts the budget. So we only provide the materials that are not readily available. And then we got 46 booths. We have 23 people working on the waterfront every day, just getting the work done. And using tactics like coffee farmers. We have some of the best specialty coffees being produced from out here, and getting farmers to come together in a cooperative, like 8,500 of them, and collectively they get certified for Rainforest Alliance, make sure they follow every rule that's there to just make sure that they get there. We now adopted also some biological monitoring of water quality, being able to track macroinvertebrates to see to it that then we can use those to indicate where some of them are geos. The geos will not function well if they have sediments and so on. We make being able to purchase goods in bulk, and also making sure that we communicate through the media, and positive media has been very important for us. So just a few quick items there to talk about, also making sure that procurement, because we work through communities and community groups and local NGOs, and also making sure that we can reach out to the farmers. We have 152,000 farmers in a scheme. and we're getting this going, and we're having to train them that way, including for a carbon project. And I think my colleague talked about a carbon project there, based on smallholders. 164,000 farmers are part of this. And then, like I mentioned, making sure that we have everybody participating. And I come to close just to say what is most important for maturity. Nairobi lays their heart for mature to be a mature water fund, meaning it can operate independently from 2 years back. We have institutional health, we have a charitable trust, we have a methodology for setting governance. They have a trust deed, they have a strategic plan, we have election systems for board of trustees, for directors, and so on. We have women, we have youth, and also we have financial sustainability. We can sustain the work. And also we have an endowment fund that we use for that. So again, just being able to illustrate with these graphs here, that we have seen threats in the use of chemicals for water treatment go down. And we have also been able to see river flow along some of the rivers that serve the city of Nairobi going up. I'll spare that in the interest of time, but mention that we actually have 42 million liters more of water now available for the city during the dry season that wasn't there before. Again, very convinced members and parties. I think this slide you can lead. Just put a few things here. We've been able to, of course, we won, of course, at a national level, getting a smallholder farmer to get voted the best farmer in the country is a big thing. We've been voted by TNC once as the best project. We won for the wet rats. We were 2018 champions for World Wet Rats Day and many other accolades. But we look out for challenges because the water fund is young, the trust is young, and we have staff. And we also have champions who probably have to depend on learning on how champions do their work in Latin America and the US. So just wanted to say here that we're making a big impact for climate. And one of our climate champions, Elizabeth, was out in CNN telling youth like her that it's time they took responsibility around the world. And today she's gone to the UN General Assembly to let the UN know. And everybody in the world to know that actually the youth have a role and they can do something on this. Again, we have a marathon team. So when you come for your safari, make sure you also come and learn with us. At least we can jog with you. And we do this and we're replicating this in other teams and other areas that we work. So quickly putting up our map here, maybe they're going to the detail because the challenges are many in this continent. We started in Nairobi, but all of a sudden Cape Town was thirsty. And Cape Town needed a bit of water. And then we went there and talked to the office of the mayor. Then Cebu in Morocco, we now spread this to 17 water funds in the African continent. And counting, the demand is huge, like Eustace said. We're asking Eustace and team to support us continue. So I just want to say at this stage that we've seen that it's possible to move challenges into solutions and then get established sustainable institutions. That's what Nairobi Water Fund is, and turn a farmer like the one I have on screen to become the best farmer in the country. Thank you very much, Florence. Thank you, everybody, for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred and Karen, for the great presentation. And just to let everybody know, the 2 case studies can be found on the Toolbox. We'll keep uploading more. There is already more than 25 cases already uploaded on the Toolbox. So kindly visit the Toolbox and you can be able to browse some of all these resources. So we'll go to the Q&A now, where we'll start with the people who had raised hand. We had Elba Fialo, who raised hand. You can start with her and then you can proceed to the questions that have been typed in the Q&A tab. So keep the questions coming on the Q&A. We'll have about 10 or so minutes answering the questions. Elizabeth, are you able to unmute Elba for us? On the Q&A tab, where one of attendees asked if we have an intersection materials between resident watersheds and sanitation services planning, and are there resources in the Toolbox focused on this intersection? I'll have Eustace attempt this question and also maybe respond to another question where the question is, can individuals and community groups apply for support from the Nature for Water facility?
Lovely. Thank you, Florence. And thanks, Fred, for that great presentation, and Karen, to hear more about Sebago and Upper 10 and Nairobi. So Regarding sanitation services, there absolutely is a very important interface between nature-based solutions and water quality in our systems. In particular, as it relates to sanitation, treatment wetlands are a pretty good bet. Also, there's a variety of things that happen in an urban core, such as like green roofs and so forth, that can make an impact. Two programs that come to mind that Nature for Water is working with. One is in Yaquil del Norte, which is in the Dominican Republic. It has an extensive program of implementing treatment wetlands with the goal of improving water quality to the downstream population. Similarly, another program that comes to mind is Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, which is the mandated sort of flood manager for the city of Milwaukee, which is a city of 1.1 million people. And their RWR program is all about planting trees and restoring wetlands, managing wetlands to avoid combined sewer overflows, which is a related point to sanitation that is a common feature / bug of many of our cities around the world. And so those are just some of the interfaces. We do not currently have a built out set of materials on the toolbox, but is absolutely something that we want to look into as we continue to build this bench of listening to which programs are working on the ground. So it's absolutely a good call out. We should have those materials in the future, and it's a good thing to point out. So that's the first question. Second question is, can community groups, individuals apply for support for the Nature for Water facility? Absolutely. So we provide via our call for proposals a regular process to help with those, especially program design elements. So is there a local landscape and context where there is a watershed investment program that can work at scale to deliver water security and co-benefits? That's our sweet spot. We've also discovered in the sweet spot that these programs tend to only work if you have a utility or watershed management agency or river basin organization as a partner in some way or shape or form as part of the consortium. Sometimes that utility wants to be first and it wants to be, up in front and wants to own it themselves. That's actually fairly rare. To date, we've mostly seen NGOs and local organizations be in partnership with those institutions to make these programs work. So absolutely, local community groups, NGOs, individuals can apply for support. But recently, we've been inquiring to show consortiums that include a mandated water sector actor, because we've seen it to be typically essential as an enabling condition to make these programs work at scale.
Great, thank you, Eustace, for that response. And just to add on that, we have several case studies from different utilities already on the toolbox. Not a direct intersection, but can be helpful on how sanitation companies combine NBS. So we'll go to the next question, which has been asked for Karen. Sebago isn't much degraded, no treatment is needed for drinking water. How do you convince donors / investors to invest?
Thank you, great question. So I did not mention that the primary challenge we're facing currently in the watershed is the expansion of the urban area and forest conversion up into the watershed. We had a study done. So currently the watershed is 84% forested. And we had a study done that showed that around 76% of forest, below that, we would begin to see water quality degradation that could lead to a filtration plant needing to be constructed. And again, the estimated cost of that is $250 million, which would drive water rates up. So initially, when we started doing building our business case, we assumed that a potential increase in water rates would drive interest in investment in our work. And we were surprised to learn as we started reaching out to businesses that actually, although they were interested in that, they were much more interested in other benefits of our work. So we have a number of breweries and beverage partners who are very interested in the quality of the water that's utilized in their product. A number of businesses are very interested in investing in the communities where their employees live and work. In Maine, we see a sort of outmigration of youth and talent. And so there's a big drive to try to retain talent in the state because of the quality of life here. We've also seen interest in sort of the positive PR and marketing aspects of being a partner with us, as well as helping to support business sustainability goals. And many of our partners are B Corps or benefit corporations. So working with us can help them achieve or maintain their certification as a B Corp.
Great. Thank you, Karen, for that great answer. Fred, we have a couple of questions, but I'll start with the one from Hein Gethammer, who asked, the example shown seem to be focused on a local one country watersheds. What is your track record or ambition regarding transboundary watershed funds to preserve water towers and river basins? Does it bring additional challenges, and do different regions, that is like Latin America versus Africa, bring different implementation challenges?
Thank you very much, Gautama. And so first of all, we are a fairly young program, started in 2012, is basically about 12 years old. We tend to go deep because the challenges are urgent. So when we go to a place, we tend to go deep. And that has impeded our expansion quickly. So we only right now got the footprint to about 17 waterfalls. 2 of them are still in formative stages. We do think there's much more demand, and we're going to go there with time. It just turns out that, I'm sorry, forgive my writing. I have a movement sensitive light, so it doesn't see me now. That's okay. I'm still here. So that's what I want to say. So again, being able to implement this within a geography that you can accomplish and impact is important. We have a few of our cities in Africa really dependent on water that comes from watersheds that are really big. And one of them is Lubumbashi in the DRC, Congo, where the watershed for that feeds Lubumbashi is probably slightly smaller or just about of Italy. And you need lots of resources to be mobilized to really create impact quickly. So we put that as a bit of consideration. Will we actually be able to impact positively so that we can get positive change? The thing is, we've seen actually transboundary initiatives come in. We're seeing in Ghana, for example, the Black Water, which is the river that flows from Burkina Faso, comes along the boundary, comes into Ghana. And the challenges are both in Burkina Faso, the challenges are also in Ghana. So we are seeing the need to have a transboundary. Luckily, we have a transboundary commission to work with. And then the things we now need to figure out is to wait where the actions are most needed. And then we see how do we pay for them and how do people view equity. Because we've seen at a time when money is being moved across the boundary, particularly if it's public funding, citizens want to have an opinion there, because then some of this, every country is trying to develop their side. So, but again, see how can you make equity or equitable distribution so that we are able to impact the areas that really need to be impacted. But generally, it is true where watersheds can be managed. We like to do more of this, because then you win more countries and more citizens and more rivers together quicker, and we can spread the use of nature-based solutions. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Fred. I see we have more questions. What I can promise is that all the questions on the Q&A will be sent together with the recording to all the attendees, so that you can have 1 minute on the announcement, where Michael Gardner have one main announcement before we wrap up. We promise we'll send you the answers to your questions with the recording. So we'll share also the links while sharing the recording to that event, please ensure that you register or copy it and paste it somewhere else before we end the webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure to be your host today. We have a lot of more resources coming up, webinars as well as Toolbox resources. Please keep an eye from my emails, resilient.watersheds.org or from florence.mugi@tnc.org. Thank you and hoping to see you in our next webinar in another month. Thank you so much and bye everyone.